Hello and welcome to another edition of Zog Science. Today we're going to be talking about how we classify organisms. So, kind of thinking back to the beginning of the year, we were talking about how do we classify things as being living or non-living. In order for something to be a part of a kingdom or a part of the classification system, they have to be considered to be alive. So in order to be alive, you have to be made up of cells. You could just be one cell or many cells. Based on a genetic code, obtain and use energy in a process called metabolism. That is usually either anaerobic or aerobic respiration. You have to respond to your environment, so you have to be interacting with your environment in some way, making changes in your behavior or what you do based on the environment. Maintain homeostasis. Remember, homeostasis is an internal balance. So we're talking about keeping the right amount of water, right amount of salts, through the processes of active and passive transport. We also are going to need to grow and develop over time. Reproduce, so you need to produce offspring. And then finally, you need to evolve. So those are all the criteria for how we as biologists consider something to be alive. So classifying organisms, we want to name them in a very logical way and give them a name so that way everybody in the world knows which organisms we're talking about. So we use taxonomy, which is the classification of organisms using universally accepted names to avoid confusion when we're talking about regional names. So, our word for dog is different from the Chinese word from dog, which is different from the Arab word for dog, which is different from the French word for dog. So we use a system that everybody can understand across the whole world to make it very simple and easy. So we had this dude named Carolus Linnaeus, and he developed binomial nomenclature. So bi means two, nomial name, so two names. All right. And he also helped develop the 7-layer system of classification, and that system goes kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. We have since added on domains. This system has actually changed several times throughout the years. So a good acronym to do that is Dreaded King Philip Came Over for Great Spaghetti. So domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And you'll notice here that the genus is capitalized, the species is lowercase. That is the accepted function for how that works. That is how you do that. You'll also notice that these are italicized. Whenever you have a binomial name, the scientific name of an organism, it is always italicized when you are typing it. If you're writing it, it's okay. If you don't italicize it, it's kind of difficult to do that. So if we're taking a look at animals, right? Animals, sea stars, yes, those are animals. Snakes, these are all would be in kingdom Animalia. Then the phylum would be Chordata, that is those that have a spine. So these all have spines. Then we've got our mammals, Carnivora, Ursidae, which is bears, Ursus, the genus, and then the species, Ursus arctos, that would be the grizzly bear. So naming organisms, people refer to common things in day-to-day. Common names can kind of depend on the location. So cougars, mountain lions, pumas, and panthers are actually all the same. And binomial nomenclature, again, is that two-name system. It is usually Latin or Greek that is used for the scientific names. So that's why you have Animalia, Chordata, Mammalia, Carnivora, Felidae, Felis, and then Concolor, that would be the cougar's name. And again, you notice that it is italicized. The genus is capitalized. The species is lowercase. So, Venn diagram. Both of them help us to name organisms. A binomial system is a two-word system. It's written in Greek or Latin. It's the same name no matter what nation, so you can go to anywhere in the world, and as long as you are using your binomial nomenclature with a scientist, now most lame people are not going to know, but for a scientist, they're going to know what you're talking about. So if we go over to Mongolia and we start talking about Homo sapiens, they're going to understand what that means. Again, it's genus, species, uppercase for the genus, lowercase for the species, italicized. There's your example, Ursus arctos. Common names have one or more words. Name varies depending on the region or the language. Different species have the same common name. For example, the grizzly bear. So, how can we classify the following structures? Right, we can kind of look and see that they all have different structures. They all look kind of different. But in some ways, they kind of look the same too, right? So we've got kind of some spirally structures here, some spirally structures over here, right? So just looking at our physical characteristics, we can try to classify things. Now, scientists used to only rely on physical traits and anatomy in order to classify organisms. So they would look at, the outside as well as internal anatomy, skeletal structures, all those kinds of things. However, advances in DNA technology, we can now classify organisms based on their genetic or evolutionary history, or another fancy term for that is phylogeny. So because of this, taxonomic classification is not permanent. It's constantly changing as new information is discovered through DNA sequencing. It is not a fixed system. Now, most of it is fixed. They're just kind of our areas that we make a random discovery and therefore change things around a little bit. So over time, when Linnaeus first developed his 7-name classification system in binomial nomenclature, there were only animals and vegetables. Obviously, with the discovery of the microscope and a lot of other things, we have expanded that. For a while, it was just the 6 kingdoms, but they have since taken those kingdoms and put them under the domains, which are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Archaea is our archaic bacteria. They are not quite as evolved as other bacteria. And what I mean by not quite evolved is I mean that they have gone through less changes over time as compared to bacteria, and those are some of the older organisms on the earth. So a cladogram, we've kind of mentioned this in class a couple times, but it is a diagram that shows the evolutionary relationships between groups of organisms, and it helps scientists to understand how lineage breaks away from another in the course of evolution. So if we take a look at our example, if we were to be using a classification system simply based on physical characteristics, right, we would think that the barnacle and the limpet are more closely related to one another than they are to the crab. However, when we do genetic analysis, we actually find that crabs and barnacles are both crustaceans. They both molt an exoskeleton and they have segmentation, whereas limpets are a gastropod, which is a different type of animal altogether. So in fact, the crab and the barnacle are more closely related to the limpet. And this right here would be the cladogram, where we're showing the how closely related they are to one another. And we've been doing lots of examples of those in class. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.